Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. I've known Jeff for, I don't know how long, decades. He is a consummate plantsman. He's extremely knowledgeable about aloes and cycads. He's one of the world's experts on cycads. He's a research associate at Lotusland up in Montecito. He is the owner of Aloes in Wonderland, which is a wonderful destination. We probably should schedule a field trip to visit you sometime from the Hort Society. And he's also a terrific tour guide. I had the pleasure of participating in a tour of Oaxaca, of all places, that he led several years ago, which was a fabulous experience. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing this presentation and learning about this special project that I think he is actually spearheading about the flora of that magnificent place in Mexico. So please welcome Jeff Chemnick.
Thank you, everybody. Hello out there in Zoom land. And can we have the lights off? Hi, here. I am Jeff Chemnick from Santa Barbara. I have a botanic garden nursery called Aloes in Wonderland, which I invite you to come and visit sometime. Please go to my website, aloesinwonderland.com, for contact information. Here we go. And no, we don't go. The button doesn't work. All right, guys, so I'll use this other button. All right, so Oaxaca is a state in southern Mexico. You can see the outline of the Mexico there. And Oaxaca down at the bottom, some of the major cities in that map. And here is a map that shows you the prominent mountain ranges and some of the rivers. Oaxaca has the highest floral diversity in all of Mexico, as well as avian diversity and reptilian diversity. Why does it have such high diversity? Because it has a confluence of several mountain ranges. So there are mountains and valleys in close proximity, and those are drivers for speciation. There are also, in the north is the Atlantic rainforest and goes down to 300 feet. And the high point in Oaxaca is somewhere around 14,000 feet, 12,000 feet. And down into the Central Valley, I'm going to go to the next slide, and you can see the major regions. The capital is in the Central Valley, and then there is the Sierra Sur, the southern mountain range, and then the Pacific coast, which consists of a very dry forest. So there are many different kinds of habitats: oak pine forest, cloud forest, tropical deciduous thorn forest, dry forest, and tropical rainforest. There are many reasons that people go to Oaxaca. Some people come for the art. Some people love the, you guys need to see the Santa Barbara horse. I mean, so the little image of me up there, does that stay there? That's okay? Okay. These are alebrijes. Little carved jobs that have become very popular. And curiously, they're made out of bursera. And you know, bursera is also used for making incense. And there are a number of bursera species in Oaxaca, and they're very popular with a lot of cactus and succulent types. Many people are fascinated by indigenous folks, the clothing, the languages. Oaxaca has one of the greatest diversities of indigenous languages. Apart from Spanish, there's Mixteco, Zapoteco, Chinanteco, Mije, and on and on. And there are famous holidays like Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, which is Halloween, but for 2 days, and you get up at 4 in the morning and you go to the local cemetery and have a good time. A lot of people come to Oaxaca to go bird watching. It's fantastic birding. There are a number of very wonderful endemics and near endemics, like this Rosita's bunting. And I encourage you to go to Oaxaca and bring your binoculars. Don't you dare go without your binoculars. A lot of people go for the reptiles. This is a near endemic rattlesnake, Crotalus molossus, black-tailed rattlesnake. And then there are the beaches. There are miles of deserted coastline in Oaxaca. And somebody done it. Oaxaca only borders the Pacific Ocean, not the Atlantic Ocean. But it's one of the longest coastlines of any state in Mexico. And this deserted coastline is wonderful for things like breeding sea turtles. This is the phenomenon known as an arribada, where the females come in the tens of thousands to lay their eggs. Usually it's at night, you gotta walk around with a flashlight, but once in a while you get lucky and they do it during the day. It's also very good for surfing. Surfing has become hugely popular in Oaxaca, and all those surfers drive around, and all these people that are going there for the art and the crafts and the various festivities are seeing plants, and they're wondering, what are those plants? And that's what we're here to take a look at tonight and address the need for a field guide to identify the plants. Oh, I should mention that there are a lot of, whoa, how does this go backward? It doesn't. The back arrow, I'm hitting this thing. It doesn't work. That one doesn't work either.
Which one were we at?
I was doing this because this doesn't work. Go up there. Nope, down. You had it, right? That one.
There we go.
Okay, I promise I won't touch anything. I could get my computer. Not full screen? No? Yes.
There.
Okay.
These should work now. Back in
Oh.
the
Good. Yeah, you should just stay. All right, there are another reason people go to Oaxaca are for the wonderful old colonial towns and ruins and churches and buildings. And there are a few biosphere reserves. Some of them are quite large and they're very worth exploring. No, it doesn't work. Now it works. Okay. I'm back. All right. Now I got it. I promised for a long time. I started out looking for cycads. Here I am in my Charlie Manson phase in the mid 1970s. And somewhere along the line, I got the idea to start leading tours commercially. I would bung a bunch of people into a van and drive them around and show them groups of plants that they wanted to see. And it started out just doing cycad tours. Here are the plant paparazzi taking pictures of this Zamia and Chiapas. And then I branched out into cactus and succulents, salvias and dahlias, orchids, and I even co-led a couple of trips with Pam Coity Hyatt looking at bromeliads. Bromeliads have become very popular in recent years, but I have stopped leading tours commercially and now go just for research and personal needs. But here's a group of happy people during the tour, and it reminds me to tell you that one of the other reasons people come to Oaxaca is for the food. The meals in Oaxaca are spectacular. Many people would tell you that the best cuisine in all of Mexico is in Oaxaca. And in fact, there are Oaxaca foodie tours that you can go on restaurant to restaurant. So in driving around, you see wonderful vistas like this. And the question is always, what plant is that? And it's a wonderful thing when you can put a name on that plant. Sometimes you aren't able to identify something to species, just to genus or even to family. But it's our intention to create a field guide where we can identify plants to species. So I was watching a presentation by John Redmond a while back, who gave this beautiful show on Baja California and the plant field guide that he had cooked up, working on the old Norman C. Roberts book from the 70s, a field guide, a Baja California plant field guide. And I thought, why can't we do this for Oaxaca? The need is there, it doesn't exist. And the only real, the only currently available field guide of any merit is this, Diversidad Florística de Oaxaca, but it's in Spanish, and it's more of a plant list rather than a proper field guide, has 400 and something color pictures. And so we wanted to treat upwards of 800 or more species along the lines of the Baja field guide. And we wanted to be able to give people field marks so that they could go into the field and see something and confidently state that if it has a plaid shirt and a hat and a camera, it's probably a Brian Kimball. So here's the team, that part of the team that we put together. I invited a number of the best field botanists that I knew that had a lot of experience in Oaxaca, and happily they said yes to participate as a group of some 10, 12 authors to hopefully finish this project within a couple of years. And the hub around which this wheel spins is my dear friend and colleague, Sylvia Salas Morales. I've known her for some 30 years. She lives in Oaxaca, founded an organization called Cerbo, runs the largest herbarium, and knows more about Oaxacan plants than any other living soul. Here's Julia Eder, who lives in Mexico and is a specialist in agaves and echeverias. Can anybody pronounce the name of this place? Ricardo? This is in Cerro de la Muerte and Cerro de las Flores, pardon me. And I think that's Chinonteco, and it's a lot of points in a Scrabble game. But Vanessa Hadley from the Berkeley, who used to be at Berkeley Botanic Garden, is part of our group. Greg Starr, who specializes in agaves and using his body to measure the diameter of very large sycamore trees. And Pam Coity-Hyatt, whose specialty are bromeliads, especially tillandsias. And oh dear, Catherine's, well, she's right behind me. This is an interesting plant, agave gypsicola, was only discovered and described a few years ago, and it's already commonly available in cultivation. And then John Traeger, local boy made good, you all know him. And Brian again in the plaid shirt and the baseball cap. Tim Gregory, whose generous support has helped fund our project. He's also very good at palms and cycads. And then our driver, Javier, who is always at the wheel of the vehicles that we take. And as a result of the many, many trips that I have led and he has driven, he could probably take you on a wonderful botanical tour of Mexico himself. By the way, check out the leaf of that Xanthosoma. So here we are doing field work. Should also mention that Jeff Moore and Randy Baldwin are going to provide some technical and botanical assistance toward the end of the project to help us get to the goal line and across the goal line. So here we are at Rancho de Leon. The first course of action was to create a plant list, a species list. There are 9,000 or so species of plants in Oaxaca. It's very difficult to decide which ones to include, what not to include. That's probably the most difficult task that we had, and everybody has their specialty, and of course they want their plants in the book. And there's much discussion and much negotiating to include plants or exclude plants. And then we have to concern ourselves with synonymy, the joys of synonymy. This is an orchid, and you can see the various names that it has had in the past, all of them valid at one point. And check out that local common name. That's another high scorer in Scrabble. I wondered, citrina means yellow, or could it be that the plant actually smells like lemon? Was it named because it smells like a lemon, like a citrine? But I found out that it is flower in the form of a yellow serpent head. So there you have it. So we start with the lower vascular plants like Selaginella, which is the resurrection plant. Usually you see these, they're just little crusty brown fists on the hill. And only after they get wet do they open up and look beautiful like this. But there is a tip: if you find them in the field and you've had a lot of coffee to drink that morning, you can have a private moment with the plant and then come back in 20 minutes and it will open up. Do I need to explain that? So pines, there's a lot of pines in Oaxaca, more than most people think, and there are even more oaks. We're not really sure how to treat all these. We could sure use some help if any of you are experts in the genus Quercus or Pinus, but We will have a few, we promise. Mostly it's all about the wonderful flowering plants. Ipomea consati, whenever you see the specific epithet consati, you know that it's named for the wonderful Mexican botanist, what was his first name? Casio Consati. And here are two color morphs of this beautiful Ipomea. Not much to say, just beautiful colors. There are a lot of roadside weeds, and we always forget them. And this is one of the benefits of having a field guide is that you can remember them. And this poor thing, Lamaruxia, is all over Oaxaca along the road. And everybody says, what is that thing? What is it? And we call Sylvia, if there's cell reception, to be reminded. Once again, Lamaruxia, oh yeah. But with the field guide, we won't have to call Sylvia so much. Another plant that's very common along the roads, it's also popular in cultivation, Lobelia laxiflora. And we are giving emphasis to the endemics and near endemics because they're special. They occur only in Oaxaca, or what we call Mega Oaxaca, which is the state and adjacent areas maybe of Puebla with similar habitat that is found in Oaxaca. This is Agave nizendensis, which is found in a very, very small range near the town of Nizanda. It's almost not even an agave, and I think some workers have placed it into a different genus. Tillandsia oaxacana, I don't think is quite endemic, but at least it bears the name of the state. And then here is Cephalocereus totalapensis, which is endemic, but I include this slide to show you one of the problems we're facing. You see at the base there is the encroachment of Agave angustifolia, which is grown for mezcal and tequila. And way in the distance in the notch of that mountain, you can see a large field. For years, I used to drive down the Isthmus Road from Oaxaca to Tehuantepec, and it was a wonderful miles and miles and miles of desert and tropical deciduous thorn forest. And now it's a quilt patchwork of these agave fields, and they are increasing, and it's kind of a race in time to get to be able to see by the road these special plants. Well, that was another goal that we had, was to include plants that you see from the road, from a dirt road or a paved road, but nothing that you had to hike for 12 hours up a mountain to see, because what's the point? If you're already a specialist and you're going to see the plant, you don't need the field guide. It's more for people that are taking a trip to Oaxaca, maybe to see plants, maybe to go surfing, maybe to look at churches. And they want to know, what's that yellow bush? What's that red flowering thing? Habitat destruction proceeds apace, alarmingly so, but it's a fact of life. People need to eat, they need to grow corn, they need to ranch, but it is sad when you come around the corner and you see this. But happily, there are reserves and protected areas. The Cañada de Cuicatlan is one of the best. It straddles both Oaxaca and north and west into Puebla, and it has miles of desert and tropical deciduous thorn forest, oak pine forest, cloud forest, and a wealth of plants. I'm always amused by this picture because I know these guys, and it makes that cactus look really big, but they're actually very short. Sorry, Fred. This is Echinocactus plateacanthus. It occurs over a large part of Mexico, but there are many areas of it in Oaxaca, and it's an amazing thing to see a cactus that big. It's the same genus that golden velvet cactus, or the largest, is Pachycereus weberi. Now, central Mexico and northern Mexico are famous for their little globular, tiny jobs that are hard to find. Oaxaca is famous mostly in the cactus department for its large candelabra cactus. And this thing is the largest of them all. Here on the left, you can see Anders Lindstrom from Nong-Nook Garden lending scale. And that's a little cactus. On the right, you're going to see it flowering. Usually you just see the cactus with no fruit and no flowers on it. Another giant candelabra type thing is Pachycereus pecten arboriginum. One of the other items that we intend to give emphasis to is the etymology of the specific epithets. In other words, what does the Latin name mean? And Pecten arborigena means native's comb. I suppose the guy that described the cactus saw some poor person combing their hair with that fruit. That had to hurt. And then Malocactus, I believe there's only one species of this genus that's widespread in South America, especially in Brazil. But here it is in Oaxaca, growing right on the coast with this ridiculous cephalium. Barrel cactuses of all kinds are very popular. Phaerocactus macrodiscus, when it's not flowering, you see how it's sort of half in and out of the ground. They're very easy to step on. And if you're wearing sandals, they usually win. You have to be very careful walking around with Phaerocactus macrodiscus is. And this picture, thank you, John Traeger, of Dysarcactus martianus. It's an epiphyte dripping over oak trees in 7,000 to 8,000 feet elevation. And when it's in bloom, it's a spectacular display of these red flowers. Then there are the mammillarias. Everybody, well, not everybody, some people are crazy for mammillarias, and there are far too many of them as far as I'm concerned. But we will treat probably the more common when they are in bloom. This is one of the famous endemics, Mammillaria Huitzilopochtli. That's about 35 points in Scrabble. And some of these are impossible to find when they're not blooming. They're very easy to find when they are blooming. And this one's up at about 9,000 feet in cloud forest. They occupy a number of different kinds of habitats and they're really quite nice mammillarias. So then another popular group, one of the most popular, agaves. And here is Agave marmorata with gale lending scale. There are various populations of this, kind of a green form and a blue form, and they all have this beautiful saffron colored inflorescence that you can see from miles away. This plant is often in evidence on the sides of roads in bright colors. And invariably somebody will yell to stop. What is that red thing? And it's this agave, Agave carnvalis. The first time I remember traveling with Brian Kimball, I nearly crashed because I was driving and he yelled, stop. And I thought I'd hit somebody. Look at that red agave on the hill. I got to get a picture. And it was this. This is kind of a dog, Agave karwinski, but it's an important plant because it occurs in the valley of Oaxaca and it has great ethnobotanical use. It's used for making mezcal. And it's an oddball because it's arborescent. There aren't many arborescent agaves. But honestly, it's not very appealing. You don't see this grown in many gardens. This one you do see. This is one of the beautiful blue miniatures, Agave macroacanthin. If you look at the tip of the leaf, you'll see that little gimlet tip. And if you're stuck and you got a bottle of wine and no corkscrew, this will open it up. And then maybe one of the most remarkable miniatures is agave. Not really red. They kind of go from red to green depending on the time of the year or the exposure where they're growing. But they look really good when they're in red. Agave giangola comes from the Giangola Mountains at the ruins of Giangola. And you get the picture. It's all about giangola. And they're about 5 feet in diameter. And yeah, it's one of the special endemics of the state. And this agave is not really growing out of Gary James's head, but it looks like it. Agave salmiana, widespread, one of the larger agaves, and the largest of them all, Agave atravirens, from the cloud forest. Some of them can be 20 feet from leaf tip to leaf tip. And added bonuses they have in the lower right-hand corner, you see the flowers. The inflorescence is shockingly red. And carpic, they die when they bloom, but what a way to go. And then we have the near agaves, the agave relatives, Phrycreas. Phrycrea McDougallii was discovered by Tom McDougall, and the type locality was in the isthmus near Rio. It has been extirpated from the type locality. Nobody has seen this plant truly in the wild for many, many years, but people have looked, I have looked. But way away in the Mixteca, on the west side of the state near a town called Chasumba, I found this population. I was never really sure if it was feral or wild. It's sometimes not easy to tell. Is a plant actually a natural population? Is it planted or has it escaped? And this plant had all the hallmarks of a natural population. Big plants, little plants, seedling, flowering, all the recruitment. I talked to an old guy in the village and I asked him to tell me why this plant was there. And he said that his grandfather and in his day, they used to use the plant to make soap. So I thought, aha, the plant has ethnobotanical use. It must have been brought hundreds of years ago from the type locality, and it just happened to establish itself here near Chizumba, but it's a feral population. So this is an interesting case of an endemic to Oaxaca, extirpated from its natural habitat, but still persisting as a feral plant miles and miles from where it came. Another Furcrea, here's John Blecklanding's scale, Furcrea longeva, that some people mistakenly call Bettinghausi or Rosalie, but those species are synonymous with Palmetieri up in central Mexico, and never mind all that. It's still Furcrea longeva and grows in a variety of habitats, tropical deciduous thorn forest, oak pine forest, and pine forest. What's that? And that beautiful yellow thing is what used to be called Senecio precox, now Pitacolin precox, one of my favorite composites. You have to like a composite. This is a good one to throw your money into. Now we have the bromeliads. By the way, this is the door prize, it's endemic. Here's what all grown up. Hectia lanata. Lanata means woolly. The wool is on the underside of the leaves. Sometimes it's on the top of the leaves. Very woolly trichomes. There are some wonderful terrestrial and epiphytic bromeliads in Oaxaca. I'm not sure why I labeled this. Oh yeah, I wasn't sure whether this is Lyman smithii or Monieri lapistoli. We need help with the hectias. It's an imperfectly known genus. And you see some spectacular hectias and nobody knows what they are. Well, maybe somebody does, but we have yet to meet a true hectia expert who can just go through them all and identify them. But look at that. How come this is hard to know? And there's all kinds of theme and variation on these. Some metal and red on the outside, spots with red. This used to be Tillandsia grandis, placed in the genus Pseudoalcantorea, and it grows in surprisingly dry places, even though it has those large, what look to be like mesic leaves that would grow in a wet area. It can grow in deserts and on cliffs. And then there are the Tillandsias. Tillandsias have become really popular in recent years. Maybe the most of the ones in Oaxaca is Tillandsia prodigiosa. When they're in bloom, you can see hundreds and hundreds of these dangling pink bubblegum things. And it's spectacular. Now, Tillandsias can confuse people. You see this Tillandsia lucida, those are not flowers. That's the inflorescence, and those are bracts. And Pam tells me they can persist for a year or more, but the flowers are hiding in between those bracts, and then they exert themselves. You see the purple with the yellow tips, those are the actual flowers. So the flowers come and go, the bracts persist, and so their entertainment value out of a Tillandsia for a long time. Here's Tillandsia imperialis, one of the best. Unfortunately, it favors mature oak forest, and so do people with wood-burning stoves. I always call this one hanky-panky. Tillandsia Carlos hankii. There's some little miniatures, wonderful plumose leaf jobs with very pretty little flowers, but you got to get on your hands and knees or get your hand lens out to see them. There are some well-known Tillandsias like Ionantha and Caput medusae. This is all in Oaxaca in different kinds of localities. And my favorite, Streptophila. Palm trees. There are a lot of palms in Oaxaca. Maybe the genus of the greatest diversity is Chamaedorea, but most of the Chamaedoreas are living under closed canopy in tropical forest. Hard to find, hard to see, not that many people care about them. So we'll probably pay more attention to the more conspicuous, larger palms along the road, like, which seems to favor these really windy localities. It's not easy to make a palm tree blow like that. And then Brahea, a widespread genus used commonly for thatching. Brahea dulcis has little spines along the petiole of the leaf. And one of my favorites, Brahea nitida. See that blue color? And the petioles of Brahea nitida are inerm, spineless. And here's a Chamaedorea, just for Chamaedorea's sake. This is very popular cultivation, so I thought I would include it. Chamaedorea metallica, not named for the rock band. And then, of course, there are cycads. The largest cycad in the New World, Dione spinulosum, can grow to 10 meters. Looks a lot like a palm tree. You can see them from the side of the road in many places where they occur. And straddling the border between Puebla and Oaxaca is Dione californiae, here putting out new leaves. They only put out new leaves once a year. And the recently described, we described this a few years ago, Dione planifolium, Azteca. And it may wind up that this is the most widely distributed, or one of the most widely distributed cycads in all of Mexico. It just occurs in areas that are not well traveled. In eastern Guerrero, parts of Puebla, and western Oaxaca. And then what I call tree lilies. There are a number of plants that look like rosettes on a stick. Nolinas, dazzlerians, yuccas. They're all wonderful, and they can be difficult to identify because they are imperfectly known. There are only a couple species of yuccas, but the problem with them is that they integrate. So you can have one species here and another one over here, and in between is a range of style, and you're not sure whether you're looking at Yucca mixtecana or Yucca periculosa, and we're not sure either. Bocarnia is hugely popular, and what's Greg doing back there anyway? This is Bocarnia stricta, perhaps. And my favorite, Bocarnia gracilis, there are some forests of these. For scale, look at that. We were lucky enough to find them in bloom. Last time we were there, the male in the center in the lower right-hand corner is the female. And another big fat tree is Pseudobombax ellipticum, Ricardo was showing you earlier. Now I put in the inset there the two color morphs that I know. I have only seen the white flower in the lower left in the wild, never seen the pink except in cultivation where it's everywhere. I have yet to see a real picture or evidence that this plant actually occurs in red in habitat. I understand that people have seen it and they promised to send me a photograph, but I'm going to see one. I've always wondered if it's a mutation or a variant of some kind, but here is Etnizanda, the white flowered one. Another ceiba that's fantastic is this Ceiba parvifolia. Flowers aren't much, fruits not much, but look at those spines. And then the big granddaddy, Ceiba pentandra. This species has a wide range, occurs all the way down into South America and even to Western Africa. For scale, look at that. This qualifies as a big tree. Another one of my favorites in the Caricaceae, the papaya family, Jacaratia mexicana. And I understand that the fruits actually are used to make a water, to make a refreshing drink. I've never tasted it. Ricardo, have you tasted? And I think it's supposed to be a little bitter. I don't really even like papaya, so I'm surely not going to like this, but it's a beautiful tree. Here's Julia standing next to one, so you get the idea how they look. Guanacaste or Guanacaste is a giant legume that occurs in the dry forest all up and down the Pacific coast, down into Costa Rica, and then some. Enterolobium cyclocarpum. Cyclocarpum means round fruit. The common name, oreja de toro or oreja de elefante. You can see it as the round in the lower left, the seed pod. And it makes wonderful furniture, only if you ever are going to cut it with a saw, be sure you wear a mask because the sawdust will send you into coughing fits. And then the granddaddy of them all, the El Tule Tuxodium mucronatum. This is only about 8 miles from downtown Oaxaca. The fattest tree in the world, 14 meters in diameter. That's about 41 feet. And I understand it was closed during COVID, but it's open now. Go see it. Echeverias, everybody loves them. There are a lot. Include some. Echeveria gigantea is one of the more conspicuous. This is not visible from the road, but there's a trail in a biosphere reserve, so you can walk and see Echeveria laui. Unfortunately, many of them have been collected. Now there are, for one of rangers and guides that accompany you, mandatory accompaniment with a guide, and they're trying to protect the Echeverias. But they're right there on a bank in front of you. And it's a startling thing to see in that dry habitat, this beautiful pink gray Echeveria. And then way up at the cloud forest, it's always cloudy, it's always raining. You never can get a good picture of Echeveria rosea, but once in a while the sun comes out and you can get a little light on your subject. And maybe the most widespread is Echeveria nodulosa with these beautiful markings. The one on the left is growing epiphytically on a cycad. And then there are other genera and the Crassulaceae like sedum that some people like. Salvias. I took a couple groups of salvia specialists from Europe, and they were the easiest group I ever led because all they had me do was drive 15 feet and stop. 15 feet and stop. And there on the side of the road would be all these wonderful herbaceous perennials, herbaceous annuals, salvia, 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 and easy group. But I learned a lot about salvias. I actually learned to enjoy them. This was my favorite, this bright red salvia, cinnabarina. Once you've seen a barina, you've seen them all. And then there are dahlias. The same people that like salvias also really like dahlias. The tree dahlias in Mexico are spectacular. They're growing up 8, 10, 12, 15 feet. And when you're there in the bloom, you almost drive off the road looking at all these dahlias. And then, of course, we have orchids. Sobralia is a wonderful cattleya-like genus, except the flowers are very short-lived. They live about a day, and they just continue to flower in waves in succession. Epidendrum radicans is everywhere. In the right habitat, you would drive through miles of these. In the oaks is Rincostili. And then, thank you, Julia, for this photograph. Laelia anceps is maybe one of the more famous of the orchids from Oaxaca. Sadly, it's very popular for use during nativity because it blooms November, December. So parties go up to collect these out of habitat to sell in the market for use in nativity scenes. One of the things we realize is we all have our specialties. So we go to Oaxaca, all these photograph just the plants that we're primarily interested in. There were many, many other plants that we need to include in the book because you need to know what they are, but nobody took pictures of them. So that's largely what we're doing now, is filling in the blanks, like this Nodosculus urens. This is in the Euphorbiaceae. It's called mala mujer, which I'm sure is now a politically incorrect term. But the first time I ever touched one of these plants, my hands swelled up like a catcher's mitt. It is an urticating mother. Here's something, I don't know what group to put it in. It's Dioscorea macrostachia or Dioscorea mexicana. And that's a sweet potato family, Dioscoriaceae, yeah. And this thing can get to be 2-3 feet in diameter. And I don't quite remember the story, but it has something to do with birth control. Truthfully, it was used. Does anybody know well, look it up when you get home, but Dioscorea macrostachia and birth control. What she said. Then this is one that kind of threw us. We found it, well, with an incredible thing, and it turned out to be a passiflora with these weird Portuguese man-o'-war pendant. And not all oxalis are weeds. Look at these. They may not make the cut, but I just thought I would include the photographs. Pinguiculas are very popular. They're insectivorous. If you can see closely, little black dots are former flies that have met their fate on the sticky, viscous leaf of the pinguicula. And then what to do about non-natives. There are a lot of plants that you're not really sure if you didn't know. Is it native? Is it exotic? Was it planted? And you have to treat them because one needs to know. And here's jacaranda is a perfect example of that. It looks like it could be planted. Probably it's just an escape from a garden, but there are many, many jacarandas throughout Mexico. And then this is an odd one because this is actually a native. This is near the coastal town of in Huatulco on the coast. And it's a tababuya, which I think now is in the genus Handroanthus, which presents another problem, which genus to use, trying to keep current. And this is another tababuya. I somehow left the name of the tababuya off, but I put in the Tillandsia xerographica because we were driving up to our Rancho Dion, and it was Pam that noticed that these Tillandsias hanging in the tree were the thought to be extirpated Tillandsia xerographica, and they were all over the place on this road that I had driven many times and not noticed. So I got scolded for that. Plumeria rubra. I don't know why it's called rubra. Where's the red? But it's native to Mexico. It also occurs in other places, and I'm sure that native plumerias, perhaps in the Caribbean, have red flowers, but it certainly couldn't have been described from these plants. And then Cochlospermum vitifolium is everywhere in the dry forest, beautiful yellow tree. And this is one of the specialties of the cloud forest, Bilia hippocastaneum, castaneum. The monkey hand tree gets giant. This is known in cultivation, but it's a beautiful thing to see in the wild. Chiranthodendron pentadactylon. This is one of the things I don't like is there were these wonderful plant families that all got sunk together. This used to be in the Sterculiaceae, the same family with Fremontodendron and cacao. And now it's just Malvaceae, the cotton family. Not my idea of a good time. And then there are well-known trees that occur in Oaxaca that are popular subjects in cultivation. Cordia and Ipomaea arborescens. Not all Ipomaeas are vines, like you see here. Some of them get to be wonderful trees. And then there are surprising plants that occur in Oaxaca that you didn't know came from Oaxaca, like liquid ambar. There are many places with big stands of liquid. It looks like you're in Vermont or something. The ever-present Cecropia, very characteristic plant. Usually it's a second growth or a colonizing plant in disturbed areas, and it's also very good for bird watching. Birds love to get into the fruits. And there are some oddball things, and I mean the plant, not the guy. This is Fukiaria purpusi, the Oaxacan bosom, and it's not easily seen. There are only a few along roads, but they're spectacular. Here's another Fukiariaceous plant, all related to Ocotillo. Fukiaria orchiturani. We were really lucky to see it in bloom last time, because often you just see the stems and no flowers. Notice it's red, not orange, like most of the members of that genus. And then Bursera. Burseras are hard to identify. Often you see them with no leaves, and the only way to identify them is by the checkering of the bark on the tree. But they are spectacular, and there are a number of species. There are some coral trees, some erythrinas. We went here, Carol. I don't know if you remember or not. Erythrina lanata. And then everywhere is Erythrina mexicana. Planted, people cut pieces and stick them in for fence posts, and then they grow. So the fences become alive, and then people cut the branches and make more fences and more fence posts, and pretty soon they've spread throughout the state, and they're everywhere. But they're beautiful. What a thing to be everywhere. So there are just family after family that we will cover. Malvaceae, Aeraceae, a lot of aeroids, a lot of anthuriums and monsteras and philodendrons and on and on. And then the African violet family, Gesneriids. There are even heliconias. And of course, there are begonias. Stay tuned. When we have the book done, we will have a few of each of these. So we're going to finish up with a little, some examples of ethnobotany, ethnobotanical use. You know, they always told me I couldn't take my cycads with me, but here's a guy that tried. Sylvia, you commonly see where are these displays of cycad leaves, and the white are dazzlerian, the base dazzlerian leaves, which are pulled off the plant and then woven together into these, what I call dazzlerian halos. And they are often used to ornament the frames around windows and doorways, especially around churches. And often churches will have a cycad growing in the churchyard, so they don't have to hike way up the hill or down in the valley to get a source of the leaves. This is one that we found in this town in the Sierra Norte, the town of San Pedro Yolux, growing in the churchyard because the actual population was 3,000 feet down in the valley. And we describe this as Dione argenteum, which means silver, because you can see how silver the leaves are. And then here are a couple more examples of ethnobotanical use of wonderful native plants, the dazzlerian halos, and then the dazzlerian halo maker. So lastly, the discovery of new plants continues in Oaxaca, even as recently as May. You know, you can imagine some little herb growing way up the mountainside that nobody has found and being described, but it's hard to believe that something as super sexy as a cycad that looks like this would not have been discovered till this year. And Miguel Angel found this and described it. I was fortunate to go and see it with him just, well, in April. And one of the reasons I think that it hadn't been found is it was growing on these super steep and very dangerous limestone cliffs. And not only that, right when they took this picture, I got attacked by bees. So could be the bees, could be the cliffs that have kept it a secret for all this time, but it's one of the most spectacular cycads in Mexico. So with that, I'm going to invite you to get in touch with me to come visit my Aloes in Wonderland in Santa Barbara. And thank you very much. Well, with a thorough treatment like that, I can't imagine that there would be any questions. But yes, Carol. Oh my God. Oh, okay.
So in your decision about plants to include, they had to be visible more or less from a road.
Yeah.
Relatively accessible. But what about some of these super rare plants? Are you including those or are you excluding them for fear of poaching?
That's an excellent question. She wants to know, are we going to include rare and endangered plants and range restricted things? And we thought about that, and we will not, well, we're not going to be including detailed locality descriptions. So if we say, here's a range restricted plant in the Mixteca, that doesn't really tell you where it is. And you can find that out, anybody interested could find that out going to the species description anyway. But the idea is to make it useful, for the most part, for curious passersby, interested people, but not specialists. And so most of the plants that are really endangered are not visible from the road because they're endangered, because they were once by the, by the road, and they no longer are. So most of the plants that we will treat are wonderful to behold, but not necessarily endangered. Anybody else?
Thank you. It's nice to actually see all these plants. And I just wanted to know,
I can hear.
is it going to be available to the public here? Is it going to be available in Mexico? Or it's going to be
Question is, where will this book be available? And the answer is, we're just happy to be progressing with coming out with it. But we plan to have it available as a regular old-fashioned book, and maybe online, and maybe also a Spanish version that would be available in Mexico. But we're still a couple of years away. The first job was to come up with a species list, and then we have amassed a huge catalog, thousands of photographs, and now we are in the process of doing the write-ups on all these species. And then we will try to pull it all together, and then have Sylvia sort of be our guide to go through and make sure that everything looks and sounds about right. And then we will publish, and stay tuned.
We have an online question. George saying, did Greg Stark tell you whether the arborescent agave was monocarpet? How do they form the trunk?
That is a good question. Do you guys understand this question? The agave Karwinski is arborescent. And how does it form a trunk if it's monocarpic, meaning does it, when it dies, when it flowers? I have seen dead flowering agave Karwinski, so my guess is it simply becomes arborescent. It doesn't flower, and maybe it's a meter or two and a half tall, and then it flowers and dies.
We have one more online. They're asking, who can take me to see the new Zania when I go to Oaxaca?
Who, what?
Who can take me to see the new Zania?
Not for love or money. It's very hard to get in there. We had to ask successive communities permission to get further in, and then we had to take a guide. It's probably not going to be accessible to see in person for quite a long time. Anybody else? Carol?
So about that thing, has anybody tried to cultivate it?
Well, given that it was only discovered this year, but actually Miguel got a cone, because to describe it, of course, you need both a male cone, seed cone, and a pollen cone. And so he got seed, and he has a, how to describe it? A small biological field station ranch outpost in near his home in Tuxtla Gutierrez, and he has some seedlings growing that he hopes to then repatriate back into habitat. At least that's what his idea is. No, they're like seed. Well, it's very difficult to guess because we were only at the base of the cliff and it's super steep. As far as I could see, there were maybe tens of them up here and tens of them over there. But since the habitat was on for quite a bit, I'm going to guess there are probably 500 plants or so. But it's largely an undisturbed population. Why? Because it's only growing on these limestone cliffs, not in the flats and the fields that have been cleared. So if it's been there all these years and nobody's collected it, it's a relatively undisturbed population. There may be hundreds and hundreds of them as long as there's that habitat. But it's very, very difficult, very dangerous to survey an area like that. Not even with a drone, because it's growing under closed canopy. So you'd have to get a mountain goat to go up there and count them. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, well, I've been going to Oaxaca since 1974, when I was a wee lad of 20. And at the time I thought, wow, look at all this habitat destruction. And now I'd give anything to go back and see it like it was in 1974. So it continues unabated every year. In fact, Consati, who I mentioned earlier, that Ipomea Consati, I read excerpts from a letter that he wrote to somebody in 1914, where he was bemoaning the fact that there were annual fires that he saw, that never a year went by where they weren't clearing the tops of some hills, and that in 1914 he said he was alarmed by how much habitat destruction there was. So once you have a baseline, you get a shifting baseline every year. There's more and more habitat destruction, and it's getting worse and worse. Better go soon. In 20 years, our field guide won't have any use. Yes, there is effort to preserve and protect, but it's not easy. There's a finite amount, and there's a lot of people, and they got to eat. Anybody else? We don't want to end on that note. How about a happy question?
When are you going back?
Well, I want to go surfing. I'm due for a visit probably in October. Yeah, probably go back in October. Oh, and the group plans to go back in, I think we're going in October too. Is that John over there? September, yeah, we're planning to go back in September or October. That way we will have covered various different seasons, and we will go to the west and the southwest. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much.